Please put your hands together for Scott Whitehair.
I stood in front of my 8th grade English class and got ready to get into the most important book report of my life. I had only scanned a few pages, so I can't say that I was prepared, but I was ready. I looked out across the board, students, the rest of my class, and locked eyes with my nemesis sitting in the back of the room. Actually, I locked eyes with her eyelids because she was reading Cosmo. When I left elementary school, I left as a straight A student and spelling bee champ. But when I got into middle school, it was a whole different thing. As I was told, as I was less asked what I thought and told more how to think, I just disconnected. And instead of paying attention, I stood in the back of the room, or sat in the back of the room and just doodled and did just enough to get by. Now, at this point in my academic career, it would have taken a passionate educator, a fearless, compassionate teacher to reach me. Mrs. Solansky was none of these things. It was like, Mrs. Solansky was like she retired from teaching, but still showed up for another decade. Here's a glimpse into her teaching style. She would come in, and this is every day. She would come in, and someone would go, "Hey, Mrs. S, did you read in the paper about that forest fire?" And she'd go, "I know what you're doing." And then she'd talk for 25 minutes about a forest fire. Every day you could get her off track. They were half classes. Now, the combination of my apathy and her awful, awful teaching ability combined to have me failing English with about a month to go in school. And this made me panic a little bit because I was already old for my grade, and thinking ahead to graduation, I did not want to be taking my teachers out for cocktails after my big day. I wasn't panicking yet though, because 60% of Mrs. Solansky's grade was a single book report. She did it that way so she could cut down on the work she had to do. I knew that if I got like a C, just enough that it would boost up my grade and I'd be out of there. So I didn't panic. Now, the day we had book selection, I sat there. My last name's Whitehair, so I was going last, and I didn't bother getting upset or looking into the piles up there. People were trying to peek because I saw my book as I came in. It was The Old Man and the Sea, and it was sitting there on the edge. And I was confident, since she had put no work into book selection, she just dumped a bunch on a desk. There were like picture books in there. There's Dr. Seuss. And I saw Old Man and I thought, no one's gonna take that. So I just relaxed. And I thought, I'll put on like a raincoat and do a sea captain voice. And that would be enough for a C, and then I could get out of middle school with really no effort. However, the guy right before me, Chad Schwanson, goes up and, not really looking around, he just grabs the first book he sees, and it's The Old Man and the Sea. And I'm like, shit. And Mrs. Solansky, who never stays after the bell, she runs, there's like a cloud of dust in the shape of Mrs. Solansky when the bell rings. She's like, get up there and take your book. And there's like a minute left in class, so I'm looking, and she put no work into this pile of books. There were like Dr. Seuss, there were VCR manuals. There's just like a hodgepodge. So I'm like, now I'm starting to panic, and I'm like, what am I gonna do? And the clock's ticking down, it's about to be the end of class, and she's like, hurry up and take something. And I'm like, I don't know, and I'm looking and knocking books over, and finally she grabs a book and just shoves it into my chest and goes, nice choice, Scott. As the bell rings and everybody else streams out of the class with like green eggs and ham, or you know, how to program to record when you're not at home, I look at my book. It's 300 some pages, and it's translated from French. And it's called And There Was Light, the autobiography of Jacques Lucien, blind hero of the French Resistance. I looked this book up on Amazon recently, and here are a few things that people say about it. It was kind of like reading scripture or poetry. You don't just zoom through it. So, a profound meditation on the nature of truth. One of the most challenging books my sophomore year of college. An introspective examination. This book is about nothing less than life itself. I started to think about which local bar I would take my guidance counselor to after I got my diploma. Now, as the classes went on, Mrs. Solansky had 2 people do a book report at the end of each class. So with her prelude of talking about carpentry or whatever anybody brought up, and then the end doing book reports, she would have every Friday off for the rest of the year. And as she sat in the back and people did the reports, I sat next to her, because there weren't that many seats, and I watched as, report after report, she kept her head down and read magazines. She didn't even look, she didn't even pretend. And when the person stopped talking, that would get her attention, and she'd go, "Very good, Bill," and she would copy over the grade they had for earlier in the term, just like give them a similar grade in the column. And I'm like, I'm doomed. I realized right then it's not that she was evil, it's that she was really, really lazy. And so when my book report got there, I was about a week away, and I'm laying in bed and I'm thinking, what do I do? Do I just give up? Do I just accept this? I mean, how can I she's an adult. You can't win against an adult. I'm gonna lose this, all because she won't pay. How do you make somebody pay attention? And so I stood there, about to give my report, and took 2 steps to the left, and flicked off the light. Then I held a flashlight up underneath my chin, and I said, "Come with me, inside the mind of Jacques Lucerin." And I switched on the little disco light from Radio Shack my parents had gotten me from Christmas the year before, and as lights and colors started, I said, "Blind people experience lights and colors differently." And then I grabbed a can of like bathroom spray, bad flower spray, and I started to run around the room spraying it, going, "Flowers were very intense for Jacques." I started doing like radio plays. I knew that he had something to do with Nazis, so I was like, "Look out, there's Nazis over here, duck!" I'm shot! And I'm running around the room. Then I had behind maps, I had a poster board, and I kept shining a flashlight on it. It was just crude drawings of things I thought might be in the book. I'm like, he had a horse when he was young. He loved to pet its mane because it just felt good to him. So I kept pulling those down. I'm like, there were Nazis. I was making shit up. I'm like, here's a tree, and there was gold buried under it. And he found it one day, and I'm just pulling these off, and I'm running around and spraying shit, and finally I flick on the light. And like, kids are sliding back into their desks. I'm like making out with each other. Some people are half asleep. Some people are just blinking. But I don't pay attention to any of that. I just look. And I look back. Mrs. Solansky, her jaw hanging open, looking a little confused. Shrugs and reaches down, and with one lazy stroke of her pen, frees me from 8th grade and sends me to high school, where I would spend every day wishing I was back in 8th grade. Thank you.